So we will go on to 4A, crisis programs data analysis.
Good morning, Council. How are you? In the backup, we do have a handout for you just with some visuals, different things like that.
Thank you for making it bigger. You're good.
Oh, great. Wonderful. So the council request came from council members Jonick, I believe, back in November or December. And what we were looking at was the impact of the crisis response team and Aurora mobile response teams, their response just on the impact of calls for service that we have within the city. Not sure how I can make this move down.
We'll scroll short.
Oh, great. Mine's really down. Okay. So how we collected all of this information is we pulled a variety of call types that we typically go on for these teams, just to try and get an understanding of how many calls for service truly come in that might be mental health related. And to bolster those numbers and to try and get the most accurate number, we also looked at different keywords that commonly pop up within our calls for service. So things like manic, bipolar, depression, psychosis. We looked through that in the system called Cadmine and pulled all of that. So from that, we found about 19,000 plus calls. And through here, we created a data map. If you can go back up a little bit and stay on that heat map. Thank you. You'll notice the numbers on these heat maps range from about 20 all the way up to almost 200. This is a year's worth of data, so this isn't in 1 week. If we had 154 calls that are mental health related just on a Tuesday at 2 p.m., we'd have a very different issue at hand. However, in order to best represent the trends that we see throughout the year, we did keep it a full entire year's worth of data there. You'll see the black box denotes what coverage we already have for our programs, and that incorporates both the mobile response team and the crisis response team. We found that from of these 19,000 calls, we respond to about 16% of all of them with our current staffing levels and our current resources. We have great results and outcomes, and so if we could scroll down to the second page there. Oh, sorry. We also do have a strategic plan that was in place. We had worked in 2022 when we were becoming fully city funded, which thank you again, Council, for supporting that effort. We had created an initial strategic plan, and from that, with staffing levels and different things that were affecting both the department as well as our EMTs, we adapted a new strategic plan that is proposed at this time, and it is very dependent on the staffing levels that we see in the department. So this is what we have come up with at the time. It's very hopeful, certainly depends on everything going on, and we respect that patrol does take priority in those areas. We can go down to the outcomes now. Thank you. So this is just to give kind of an understanding of what a call for service typically looks like. So our traditional call for service is about 50 to 80 minutes. We have calls for service that last about 4 hours. We have calls for service that last about 15 minutes. So they're very varied in what they look like. Whenever we show up on scene, what a traditional call looks like is we'll get there, we'll do an initial safety assessment to understand what is it that we're actually faced with in this moment. Is there a safety concern that prohibits the team either from going, or is there some sort of information that lets us know this is a CRT call versus a CRT call? From there, once it is safe, our mental health professional will do that behavioral health screening and assessment, and then we do what's called safety planning with an individual. Our whole entire purpose for these teams is diverting them from jails and the emergency system to help kind of with all of the congestion we see already. So with safety planning, we're identifying supports in a person's life, identifying coping skills, safe environments. From this, we create a level of care determination. Our goal is to keep them safe on scene. You'll see that 50% of all of our calls result with the person remaining on scene safe in their environment. There's a large portion of calls here that are listed as other. This incorporates either not being able to make contact, the person being gone upon arrival, courtesy transports to different areas and resources. So that's a very large category. On top of that, only 1% of all of our calls have resulted in jail. So that's a very big success for us. And then only 8% have resulted in emergency mental health hold. So that shows us that our team is very effective at what they do. And then if we could scroll down to the bottom as well, just a little bit further. So diversions for us, of all of our stats from 2023, we diverted 228 people from the emergency departments, and I think it was 28 people from jails. This is our current shift configuration. The vacancies that you see are from a CRT clinician moving to AMRT, a new AMRT position being added in 2024, and a case coordinator role being added in 2024. And then with that, I conclude. So if there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to take them. Yes.
So the 228, it was on the previous screen, that resulted in emergency ER hospital services. Are you seeing that those people are generally still ticketed for something, or are we identifying it's truly mental health and we're not being punitive there?
Sure. Are you reference? Can we scroll up just a little bit? Sorry.
Last.
Was it the diversions, the gray part? So those are actually people who would have originally met criteria to go to the hospital, but
Okay.
instead our team was able to provide care or
Okay.
diversion from the hospital, so they didn't actually have to go. The instances where we have had to be punitive, very, very small amount of our calls result in arrest, 1%. Whenever we do that, our team does show up at court hearings. They advocate for supportive measures. They advocate for different things to support that person not being engaged in further criminal activity.
Yeah.
And it's usually a very last resort for us.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Jen.
The keywords that you're tracking, is that through computer assistance or humans checking a box?
So we are still hoping that Force Metrics is learning. We are starting to incorporate that more into this data collection and those trends. Most of the keywords we found was looking at what is our team going on. I do weekly reviews of the calls for service we go on just to make sure that it's appropriate, but also to make sure what outcomes we're seeing. So from those calls, we were able to say, this is a very common keyword that dispatch enters in. And so those keywords come from the call notes that dispatchers put in, usually coming from the reporting party or the individual themselves or police officers.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Are you tracking people who are frequent flyers?
Yes, ma'am, we are. Yes, Councilwoman.
And what is the disposition of those folks once you see them starting to have a pattern of behaviors that keep them back?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we have a case manager on our staff. We will have 2 coming up, of course. And one of the large pieces of work they do is managing our high utilizer population and determining ways to prevent them from calling 911 and instead relying on community resources like the community mental health centers, like Aurora Mental Health, or other care providers such as like a primary care physician. So what we do is we have a very strategic process for follow-ups where we set boundaries and rules and expectations, but also make sure that we are correctly giving them resources that actually match their needs at the time. So say we provide some sort of resource and it doesn't really work for them. We're going to adapt that care plan and help enforce that. And then instead of patrol having to manage that call whenever that individual calls in or someone is calling in regarding them, we ask that patrol divert that call to us specifically so that patrol doesn't have to handle that. Now with that, there are areas and times, there's times of day where our teams are not on, so that does usually defer to patrol in those hours, but it's usually within our hours of service that those individuals are calling in.
May I ask another? How successful are you with these folks that continually utilize the service? How successful are you in getting them to get more permanent, stable treatment outside of this paradigm?
Great question. So it's very varied depending on the individual, depending on the presenting problem. Someone who has very persistent mental illness, such as psychosis, things like that, we might have a little more difficulty. One of my favorite examples of a success story was, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had an individual who called in 60 times a day, every day for an entire, I think it was 3-month period.
Wow.
We were able to work with them, get them connected to care within Aurora. Initially, their care team was in Thornton and they had moved. We were able to direct them to Aurora Mental Health Center. We worked very closely with their care team. They haven't called in since that time period. We saw an initial decrease in the first month that we connected with them from that 60 calls a day to once every 3 weeks. So very significant impact just in that initial time, and we have not heard from them since. They do still live in Aurora, so it's not that they just left, but we do often maintain that connection with people. So we become a point of contact for them, or we have the connection with their primary care provider or physician.
Thank you so much for this information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
So you said you respond to about 16% of the calls that were on the heat map. Do you have an idea of what ends up happening with all of those calls that you're not able to respond to and kind of comparing that with the calls that you do respond to?
So we aren't able to really track the outcomes as much because whenever patrol enters in their call notes, their reports, they're not looking for the exact same criteria that we are. Like, were they diverted from hospitals, right? Patrol, that's a lot to put on them. However, we are looking at the referrals that we get from patrol. We implemented a patrol referral system recently. So on their MDCs, their police computers, we implemented a link that they're able to send us a direct referral. We've done a lot of education with that. And we've also recently released a community training series in addition to a patrol training series videos that played in briefings. And we've seen a lot of good outcomes. We see officers coming to us saying, hey, instead of bringing this person to the hospital, I brought them to the walk-in center. Or instead of, arresting them with this minor petty offense, we're gonna refer them to you and see if maybe there's some additional intervention that can happen. And if this continues to become a problem, then we'll game plan later. So to answer your question more fully, we can't track the outcomes specifically, but we are still able to see the number of mental health holds being placed and of course, jail visits and things like that. But that is something we are hoping to have a better way of handling through force metrics and different softwares that we're bringing on.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will move on to retail theft repeat offenders ordinance. I am happy to bring this back. I think I mentioned in the public safety last month that I would be lowering the threshold. Not only does this lower the threshold, but this expands on what happens with repeat offenders. So I will turn this over to you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Pete Schulte, Public Safety Client Manager, City Attorney's Office. On request of you, Chairwoman Jurinsky, we drafted an ordinance. It does two things that are on this item. One is it does, as you stated, Chairwoman, drops the amount of value taken being over $100, because I know from talking to our partners at the municipal court, we seem to be having a lot of people getting up for the $280, $290. They're kind of aware, right, that they go over 300, there's going to be some issues with them having to go to jail. So that's what the first thing that this ordinance does. The second thing that this ordinance does, it adds a repeat offender provisions. The one being, if the evidence is presented, the defendant has been once convicted of retail theft or a similar offense under our code, Colorado state law or laws of another state. In essence, it's got to be shoplifting, right? That's what we're talking about here. And mandatory minimum jail sentence of 90 days shall be imposed. The court shall not set aside or suspend this minimum sentence if the first 3 days will be served at the Ward Detention Facility, and the remaining days will be served at the applicable county jail where the offense occurred. Now, what that means is the judges, if this ordinance is passed, the judges cannot put somebody on cannot suspend the jail sentence, put somebody on probation. They'll have to serve the 90 days. The second part is if the evidence was that had been previously been at least twice convicted of retail theft or similar offense and so forth, the minimum mandatory jail sentence will be 180 days. And that is, again, if this ordinance is passed, it is what the will of the city, and this is what the city is trying to do to combat this crime.
Great. I fully support this. We saw and yeah, they do know that there's this $300 threshold, so they like to play their games. If we can't catch them at 100, if we can't get the one crime rate to start going down, the one that's the only one in the city that is still trending up, if we can't get it to go down with this, I'm prepared to lower the threshold even from $100. So I'm in full support. Do my colleagues?
I concur.
Does anybody have anything?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
All right, so, and I don't know if our court administrator is here, but my question is about the folks that are currently serving the 3-day sentences for the current offense. How many of those folks are currently serving those sentences in the Aurora Detention Center versus how many are serving in Adams County, how many are serving in Arapahoe County? And then what is our actual jail capacity, right? We've heard a lot of questions about staffing, and also we've heard a lot about the physical condition of the jail. What's the actual jail capacity for 3-day sentences?
So if I can comment on part of that. So we do have a lot of capacity in the jail, but by statute, we can't hold anybody for more than 3 days, as you know. So under the current ordinance, if somebody's sentenced to the 3 days, they're not going to either one of the county jails. They're doing all 3 days at our detention facility. So, to answer that question, I don't know. I think, Ms. Heckman, I think we have been trying to work with court IT to try to figure out how many of these cases have come forward, be able to give you a report as we get forward into moving on to reviewing the other mandatory minimums, statutes that are coming up. And so, I think that's part of it. But again, it's on that 4th day. So once they hit 72 hours, that's when the law requires us to transfer them to the applicable county jail where the offense occurred.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, Candace couldn't be here today, and she let me know that, but the times that I have gone over to the jail to see for myself, and times that I've gone up and spent some time with the marshals that are taking people to and from court, they've actually pointed out people that are in there serving the 3-day holds. So I know that we have had several. So this is to strengthen that, and yeah, they're not serving any of these 3 days at either of the county. This was set up specifically for our jail.
Okay, can I just ask a follow-up? Can we make sure that that data on the number of folks that are serving in our city jail, and can we check? Because I've heard actually that folks have been sent on 3-day sentences from our jail to Adams County. So I would like us to check and verify that there's not any reason that folks may be being sent to the county jails on these offenses. And I just, for study session, would like to have that data so that we.
Sure, and I would think that if that becomes an issue, Adams County would have reached out to us at this point. So we can start to, I know that it is being tracked, as far as how many are serving this sentence. I do know that Candace has that, I can follow up with her. But I hadn't heard of anybody going to Adams County, but if I hadn't heard about it, maybe it's not an issue. And they have plenty of room in their jail too. So I don't really know what to say about that, but we can follow up on that.
I just want to make sure we have the data. And then my other question is just to the public defender's office, what would be the kind of caseload impact of a change of this type?
If I may just also comment on your previous question, if that would be okay, Councilmember Jurinsky. I can tell you that several of our clients are not serving the 3 days in the Aurora Detention Center. And this is something that I know because it makes an impact on someone's decision to take the plea, to be fair. A lot of individuals that are getting caught up with these retail offenses don't have significant criminal histories of any kind, and actually are more inclined to take plea bargains knowing that they would serve 3 days in our detention center versus going to county, because county is scary and intimidating.
It's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when that hasn't happened, we've been alerted to that on a number of occasions. I know that we have in several cases, I think at least once, brought it up to the court to ask whether or not they're going to actually serve in the detention center. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't been present for all of these instances, but Judge Day may be able to speak to that. I do know that last week someone went to Adams County with her, and I know we've had several people go to Arapahoe County to serve just the 3 days. And I know that back in September when we had the budget workshop, there was some discussion about there being a capacity issue related to staffing. And I don't know whether that's the case, or whether it's more of just the needed repairs in the jail, or what the case may be. In terms of impact, you know, the mandatory minimum sentences that passed last year, first of all, with motor vehicle theft, you know, we were typically already going to be appointed on those cases. Those weren't cases that the city waived jail on. And the 60-day sentence was actually pretty consistent with what the sentencing and the plea bargaining had been prior to the mandatory minimum. However, having that mandatory minimum increased the number of jury trials significantly. So that, in addition to the retail theft ordinance, significantly increased the time it took us to get through a case, as well as the number of jury trials. So we had 48 jury trials in 2022. We had 123 in 2023. I bring that up because, of course, that does affect resource. It affects, the information that's being right now placed on the RFP for bids regarding, cost of public defender services. These offenses, $100 or less, $100 or more, and the theft for services that we haven't talked about yet. Those are offenses that, in our experience, we haven't seen quite as few of, quite as many of, because the city does waive jail. And so I think that in those instances, you're going to see for sure a significant increase in caseload and the jury trials. Last but not least, my question, I do have a question for the city attorney in drafting this with respect to the equal protection issue as it relates to the 120 days and how that is above and beyond the comparative state law.
Okay, you want me to answer that, Chairwoman? This is on the ACLU letter.
Yeah.
So yesterday, the ACLU sent a letter directly to our council members and CC the mayor, our presiding judge, Sean Day, and then the city manager, referencing 4B. I'm a little irritated, and I'm just going to call it out because if they looked at the agenda, right, they know who the attorney was that was representing this item on the agenda. I was not CC'd. The city attorney was not CC'd, and under our rules of professional conduct, they have obligations to not directly reach out to our clients, just like they wouldn't want us reaching out to one of their clients without letting them know. So I feel a little slighted there that they didn't tell us this. The other thing is, the biggest thing that they miss out of this letter, first of all, the Colorado Supreme Court case they cited, People v. Lee, has nothing to do with what we're doing here. We're a home rule city, right? And this comes from the Constitution, all right, the Colorado Constitution. Article 10, Section 6, and I'm going to read two provisions for you out of that. Such charter and the ordinance made pursuant thereto in such matter shall supersede within the territorial limits and other jurisdictions of said city or town any law of the state in conflict therewith. Okay? Legalese says our ordinances that are duly passed by the council supersede any state law. The second part of that Section 6 of the Colorado Constitution states, the statutes of the state of Colorado, as far as applicable, shall continue to apply to such cities and towns, except insofar as superseded by the charters of such cities and towns or by ordinances passed pursuant to such charters. We are confident that this ordinance passes constitutional muster. There's not an equal protection violation. And again, this goes back to, I appreciate the ACLU, I appreciate their tenacity, wanting to make sure everybody's rights are covered. I follow them. I understand. I just wish before they start giving legal advice to our city council members that they make sure that they have the full understanding of what the law is. They nowhere in their letters to say anything about being a home rule city. They mentioned Rifle, the city of Rifle. I don't want to get into a lot because there were some discussions that my office had with the Rifle city attorney while they were going through that. And just my opinion is they're such a small town. When it got to the Supreme Court of Colorado, they decided that because of the cost, they would just change their city code back so it wouldn't be in conflict with what the ACLU had alleged. We're not in that position. If the city council passes this ordinance and says this is the law of the land and that shoplifting is not welcome in the city of Aurora, then we will do what we need to do. Again, nothing can stop anybody from filing a lawsuit. We get that. But we believe we're on very good legal foundation to support this ordinance if it passes.
Mayor, did you have something? You had your hand.
No.
No, okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to listen to what our city attorney has to say about the letter of the ACLU. And quite frankly, I need to find out what's going on in these county jails that's scaring them to go there, but not our municipal jail. And we need to step our game up, I guess, in the municipal jail.
They don't want to pay for that.
We're not doing something right then, so I'm gonna have to look further into that. So thank you for that, point there, Ms. Cadiz. And, listen, when I get calls from, property owners on the Havana bid, that we have the goodwill refusing to renew their lease because of shoplifting, that's an embarrassment. That is beyond an embarrassment. And, this is not the Coddling Criminals Committee. This is the Public Safety Committee for the city of Aurora. And this is the path that we are gonna go down. And I hope that my, colleagues will support me moving this out of committee. And, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
I'd like to add also, it came to my attention in the last Havana bid meeting that the Goodwill is not going to renew their lease because of retail theft. And if you're stealing from the Goodwill, what does that say about the protection of the businesses in our community? We need to let people know that we're open for business and we're closed to crime. If you steal, there is a penalty for that. It's about accountability and responsibility, and people need to get a clear message with regards to that, period.
I would-
And our constituents have asked for it.
And on a national level, you're seeing an ability to steal in certain states, like formerly great state of California, in which you could steal about $900 worth of stuff. Humorously, the governor of California this last week was in a store and observed someone walking out with a lot of items and questioned why in the world that person was allowed to do it. Well, it was part of something that he had to practice.
And the clerk said, because the governor.
So what you're seeing are stores and retail operations with already minimal profit margins pulling out, abandoning certain areas, and creating food deserts and such. So we don't want to be like those places, and there's local examples already. So I'd just like to point out that at a national level, in certain cities, you are seeing that urban decay. And often those people in need are those hurt the most
Absolutely.
from allowing that to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, it's 72 hours then for $100 and below,
Yes.
and then above $100, it's,
Well, anything from $100 up to $999 stays in our municipal courts.
Okay.
When it hits that $1,000
Right.
threshold,
Okay.
that's when it goes
so
to.
the $300, there's no change in, so $300.
It's up to $999.
Okay, we just moved the $300 down to one, that's
Correct.
the only change.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and the repeat offenders.
Well, in the repeat offenders.
And what was it, 100 and, what was the repeat offenders?
For the second offense, second conviction, it is 90 days. And for the third conviction, it's 120,
Okay,
180.
and then, and those are mandatory minimums. And so what's the prospect of, so how does that work with the county courts?
So
Judges?
the county courts have jurisdiction, Mayor, over $1,000 or more. And basically that's from statute. So the municipal court, as we all know, is that by the state law, we can send us up to 364 days in jail, up to $2,650 fine, right? So as long as our sentences are within that range, it works. But now when it goes to the county, a lot of times on these misdemeanor offenses that go to the county, they're not getting jail time, right? They're getting, just because of the jail issue, right? And so, it's the low level offenses, which we're talking about, which is $100 or more of, stealing, shoplifting, is we're hoping, and this is what Councilmember Jurinsky told me, we're hoping that we can send a message, right, to the citizens that we don't want shoplifting in our city. Now, I guess they could choose to start stealing more than $1,000 worth of stuff to avoid the mandatory jail time, but I hope they don't decide to do that. So
What's the prospects of the county sheriffs actually allowing the sentence to go forward?
So I've talked to Sheriff Brown several times. We talked to him when the vast majority of these will probably be in Arapahoe County. Sheriff Brown, he gets the same, when I talk to him, he gets the same, from his constituents, the same information that they're tired of prices going up. So he's willing to work with us on this. So is it, Ms. Cadiz brought up, that the fact that we're having these 3-day sentences being over to the jail. I mean, we pay a per night charge, right, for each defendant that goes to the county jail. So
Okay, so we're charged for that.
we are charged. So when they go over there, I think it's somewhere around $85 a night per person per night. And so you got to look at that. So again, that's interesting that if they're sending the 3 days, because we're, by statute, can hold people 72
I
hours.
don't understand why they're going there, because it's, our fixed cost is already paid for.
Correct.
Here,
Well, this is the first we're hearing
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
So
This
this is
is
the
on your
first we're
back.
hearing about this, that they're being sent to county jails. Because when I've gone to our jail, in the jail and then up with the marshals, I mean, they're showing me the ones who are there on the 3-day holds for retail theft. So this is the first that we're hearing about that, so we will have to look into that.
because that decision would have to be made here.
Right.
Because we're arresting and we're processing. And so it has to be somebody in our organization is sending them to the county. It's not the county saying,
The county's not picking them up, right? We do the transporting there. So I'm glad, thank you, Ms. Cadiz, for bringing that up, because we need to figure
We're
out,
gonna
yeah.
look into that now. This is literally the first time we're hearing this.
okay,
So I don't know. Anyways, all three of us agree we're going to pass this out of committee. And we are going to move on. Item 4C, police audit of case quarter 4.
then we're just changing it. That's the only-
Great, so hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Crawford. I am the city auditor, and I will be giving the fourth quarter update for the police auditor. While they're getting the presentation up, I'm gonna go ahead and just get started. So overall update, the hiring for the next police auditor is underway. Currently going through interviews for that. So I'm gonna start going over the 2024 planned audits for the police department. The first one is firearms inventory. So this is gonna be looking at controls to monitor and account for department issued firearms, and also looking at the accuracy of firearms inventory, so making sure our weapons are being accounted for. Next would be the body worn camera compliance, and this is a rollover. This will be looking at compliance with policies and procedures and utilization of systems to monitor compliance, specifically focusing on supervisor review. That's been waiting for some systems and some pieces to be put into place. Next is the special assignment selection. This will be looking at compliance with policies for selection and whether the agreed upon recommendations from the consent decree monitor regarding the special assignment selection is being implemented. And then the fourth engagement is investigation caseload management. This will be looking at policies for caseload management to making sure it's following leading practices and to make sure we have controls in place to monitor those caseload management and related activities. Next slide, thank you. So we did have some risk observations from our 2023 risk assessment, and those were around staffing, the disciplinary process, technology and training, and just some specific areas for the department and city to continue to monitor and make progress against. Go to the next slide. So completed a couple weeks ago is the property evidence compliance review. So I'm going to be going over those results with you today. The audit objectives were to determine if controls over property and evidence inventory were functioning as intended, determine if property and evidence records were accurate and complete, and determine if the intake process for property and evidence was efficient and effective. Our conclusion was that the controls observed, other than access controls, were functioning as intended. Inventory records we reviewed were complete and accurate, and the intake process as we observed it was efficient and effective. However, controls around access are not functioning as intended. Slide, please. So a little bit of background. So we performed an inventory on November 15th. So at that time, this lists the items in custody. Articles are generally lower risk items. So we typically focus on the drugs, firearms, securities, jewelry, and articles. So we select 200 items. And the way that we do that is we select 100 items from the system. And then we go and physically verify those items. Well, if we're in the general area, we select a second item and we document that, and then we trace it back to the system. So altogether, we accounted for 200 items. We're able to physically verify all items and make sure the packaging and information was accurate for those items. Next slide, please. Our first finding is there is a security vulnerability. There is a significant vulnerability that exists related to access. It was known to Public Works for months. It continues to exist across the city, not only impacting property and evidence. Due to the nature of the vulnerability, I cannot publicly discuss those areas. I can acknowledge that a portion of that has been addressed as of January 16th, 2024. Our recommendation is that Public Works immediately prioritizes and addresses the vulnerability specifically impacting property and evidence. So access controls. Specifically here, these access controls are networked badge readers. So access controls were also not working as intended. For one badge reader entering into property and evidence, 62% of the individuals with access to that reader should not have had access. This includes facilities employees, facilities contractors, IT employees, IT contractors, 2 non-property employees, and then several others. Facilities is responsible for access control for the city and controlling access to those badge readers. Facilities could not provide us support for who requested and approved that access. The police department was not aware of that access of those non-police people. This is also a citywide issue and is likely impacting other departments as well. There are secondary controls in place in property and evidence. In addition, we did review 90 days of access report to that specific reader, and we have no evidence of unauthorized access. However, there was controls in place that were overridden by facilities, and it increased the risk that evidence could have been stolen or tampered with, impacting the chain of custody. Additionally, there should be semi-annual property reviews for access. It was last documented in 2022. Those reviews, however, were looking at access groups and not the specific badge readers, so I'm not certain that those would have caught this issue. Our recommendations is that Public Works works with property to remove the access for those unauthorized individuals, and that was completed on November 14th, 2023. We recommend that Public Works ceases adding themselves to access readers in restricted areas and develops procedures preventing their employees from granting access to restricted areas without proper approvals. And we recommend the Property and Evidence Unit request and review those access reports for each badge reader quarterly or when an employee leaves the unit. So the last finding is around inspection. So Property and Evidence in their standard operating procedures has specific requirements for reviewing different types of inspections. The last documented reviews for those were in 2022. Our recommendation is that Property and Evidence conducts periodic inspections as defined within their policies, which includes accounting for inventory, keys, and policy compliance. With that, I can answer any questions.
No, I hope that this is tightened up quickly. The message was heard loud and clear.
We appreciate the auditor bringing this to our attention. This is something we're taking very seriously. Public Works and Facilities understands this is a priority to get this addressed, and we are committed to getting it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle, for all your work. We will move on to ordinance to adopt 2020 model traffic code.
Good morning, Andrea Wood for the City Attorney's Office. So this ordinance is just essentially to get us up in line with the state with regard to the model traffic code and the traffic laws that the officers are out charging. We are currently operating under the 2010 version of the model traffic code. So this just gets us up to the. Well, 2020 was the next one after 2010. So we didn't.
We're only 3 years late.
So.
Yeah. Expected, but we went through, compared the 2 versions. This ordinance here just points out some of the things that would be different in our city ordinance versus the model traffic code. So 134.1 would adopt 2020 rather than 2010. Section 118, establishment of wildlife crossing zones. In discussions with APD, we decided that that is not necessary for the city. It's not an issue that we face. In what is labeled subsection H, we would exclude 5.5. 239.5 is already excluded. And this just deals with penalties. We already have a section of the city code that deals with penalties. 1410.5 would also be excluded because we already have 134.8, which deals with no proof of insurance in the city code. And then section 1416 would be excluded Because we treat those as criminal offenses, they're charged with that rather than presenting the transit pass or failure to present a transit pass. This would also take out a section of 134.2, and that's just because that has been added to the 2020 version. It was not in the 2010 version. And then it would also amend 134.8 to include some new parts of the insurance law in the 2020 version. We're just asking that this move forward to study session.
I support it.
I second.
Yes.
We'll move it forward. Thank you so much. We will move on to ordinance theft of services, general penalty amendment. PLA.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So this ordinance adds a section under the general penalty for what we call the dine and dash. So those individuals that go to a restaurant, order at least $15 or more of food, and then leave without paying. And so what it reads is for those theft offenses involving, quote, defrauding a public establishment, end quote, pursuant to AMC 94.74D, the total amount due under the agreement is $15 or more. Mandatory minimum jail sentence of 3 days shall be imposed. In addition, any other sentence imposed by the court. Court shall not set aside or suspend the minimum sentence, but the 3 days being served at the court detention facility. Again, direction in the ordinance where they're going to be serving their time. So again, this
Yeah, I
brings
mean,
up.
it's absolutely directed in every single
It's
ordinance
considered-
where there's a case
right.
serving, so we will track that down. This sort of born from the Havana bid. Interestingly enough, you have two restaurant owners on council, but this overwhelmingly is coming from the Havana bid. I look forward to hearing from them. I know several of these business owners off of the Havana bid are coming to speak on behalf of this ordinance. So I am happy to support this. I know that it has become an issue. There was a gentleman arrested out of one of my locations. Nothing was gonna happen to him actually for the dine and dash itself. Fortunately, he had a warrant for something else, so he was arrested. But this is a problem and I'm thankful that the Havana bid folks brought this forward. So I support it. Do you have any questions or support?
I support it.
I support it.
Okay, anything else?
Just, can we get kind of some data on how many citations, right? If most people are not being arrested for $15 worth of dine and dash, just what is the citation number at this point? And then. and
Well, you're
how would
not
that-
gonna get that because we're not calling the cops. We're watching them just walk out of our places. And this is the same thing that the restaurant owners are gonna tell you on the Havana bid. This is the same thing that the restaurant owners are gonna tell you probably throughout this entire state. We're not calling. We have to keep our businesses going. We have to continue to serve the rest of the customers that are in our restaurant. And, you know, if it's $100, $150 walkout, something like that. But, my hope is that because of this, we start to get data and the message is made clear that they should at least call, and report it for even this amount, and then we will get data. But right now, I'm telling you, there's not gonna be data.
But I'd still like to see the existing data
Yep,
on
whatever there
folks
is,
that
you'll
are
get.
cited.
Sure.
Sure, and I'll tell you, Councilman Coombs, the same thing that we dealt with the retail theft side is because we're not adding a new section defining retail theft, it's just part of the sentencing, part of it under the general penalty. We have to dive in with the court administrator to figure out which one of those theft cases are actually retail theft. Same thing with defrauding a public establishment. We'll need to figure out how many of those are dine and dash versus other activities. So I'm sure we get the numbers of how many defrauding a public establishment summons we have. I just can't, I don't think we'll be able to, okay.
That's good.
Okay.
That would be-
I don't think we're gonna tell you which ones are dine and dash.
I would just say that restaurants typically, they're so busy, they're just gonna shake their heads and eat the cost. And this also affects a server if they're putting a lot of work into $100 to $200 table and then they're not getting tipped, right? So they suffer. I had a gentleman, maybe I shouldn't call it a gentleman, come into our place and took like a big shot, $100 tips, $50 tips, $100 tips on different credit cards. And they called the credit card company back and dispute the charge. So we had to eat about $700 in each guy doing that type of thing. So there's nefarious action out there against restaurants. And again, with very thin profit margins. The national average of restaurant is 3%. You sell $100, you're keeping 3 pennies of what you sell, and then you're taxed on it. So it's a thin line out there.
Well, and in this state, then you're taxed again. Go ahead.
Well, you can make a small fortune in the restaurant business. You just have to start out with a large one.
That's right.
Yeah,
But-
that's right. You go to 2 million, you'll leave 2 million.
But, how is it, how would this, I think this is important, but how would it be enforced?
Well, I mean, so they'll have to be caught, right? The situation, my situation, I went after the guy myself and was on the phone with the cops.
That'd scare me.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, the people will have to be caught sometimes. You know, they'll leave behind an ID or a credit card that links them. I've had passports left behind. You know, sometimes they will leave something behind because some establishments will say, you know, I can't start you a tab without an ID or a credit card. So that happens a lot. And they think, right, nothing's gonna happen to them. But now it'll be awesome if when they leave something like this behind and the police can go find them.
I'm hoping now, just kind of with the retail theft, Councilmember Jurinsky, is that you know, the business owners start calling the police again, right? That they
That's the
know,
hope.
right? The
Get
hope
them
is that now that
involved.
we have, and I know that Chief Morris will direct her officers to,
Absolutely. When, if this is passed, that we make sure that we gave the direction to the officers exactly how we expected them to respond to it.
Yeah, that'll be great. Did you have anything else, Mayor?
No, I think that's just my concern. I did go to, I don't know what you call it, that retail theft conference over in Denver PD hosted it for the metro area.
Yeah.
But
The com-
and that was interesting. There, what they did was the loss prevention managers were sharing the information and photos
Oh, yeah.
of offenders so that everybody would know who the repeat offenders were. I don't know if that's possible in this situation.
I think in this city, I think we take it upon ourselves, you know, we talk about who frequent known bad actors are. And we try to do as much as we can on our own, amongst restaurant owners in the city, but, you know, that's how, the ones that came forward from the Havana bid, they were feeling very left out of the retail theft. You know, and so that's how this one was born. And I hope I will do everything I can in the restaurant
Sure.
community to encourage them to call, to encourage getting IDs, credit cards, whatever we have to do.
Well, I think it's important to have the policies.
Yeah, sure.
Will this qualify as a prior offense for the repeated offenses for the theft?
I don't think we have that in place right now, but it very possibly could in the future.
right now, under the ordinance that's proposed, Ms. Cadiz, no, it does not. So, it's gotta be theft of items, right? Businesses that, you know, not service, but property.
Okay.
I think that could change later, but that's how the ordinances are written now. It wouldn't be counted as a prior. Cause it has to be, first of all, it have to be more than $100, but it's gotta be product, not necessarily service, right? Cause it's, yeah, that's my position on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in the future, it could.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add that this is us responding to the pleas of the public. The Havana bid is very well organized under Chancery Chief's leadership. And they've held regular meetings asking council and our police about what can be done to curb. Target, for example, Mississippi and Havana loses over $1 million a year in shrinkage. So what do? We just show up there and have some appetizers with them and shake their hands and smile, or do we actually do some things? This is doing some things and responding to these people. You know, of course, we want to address the root cause of the problem in various ways. We're always working on that in other ways, but the punitive aspect of it, they're looking for results.
All right, so this passes unanimously out of committee, and we will move on to the public safety action plan update.
Sorry, let me Here. Very good, thanks. All right, so yeah, Pete to the rescue. All right, we've got, item one is, you've got the numbers in there in terms of our, current staffing. And then in terms of the academy classes, we are getting ready next month to graduate our, the academy that, started in September. We're excited for that. Those folks will then get field training, be it field training for, the spring and the better part of the summer, before they are able to independently respond to calls. We're looking forward to that. That's, I think, real relief coming down the roads. We're excited for that. And then obviously we started a class in January. So that was, they're underway. And then we are working right now to have a hopefully very large class to start later this summer. June start date.
It's June. June's
My birthday. Any questions?
Sorry.
No, sorry. Any questions on
Know what the P means?
And
In ed?
FTDP.
Field training program.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And then, item two is on our crime stats. So you can kind of see the crime stats through, essentially the first, part of the year. We did have, 2 murders, last week. So that has, that's certainly an uptick there. And then you kind of see, the non-fatal shootings as well as the robbery and, violent theft. So certainly an uptick on that. Chief, anything to add on those in terms of just any early info?
No, not specifically, just that we have had the uptake in, people actually being shot, but the number of people being shot at has actually gone down. But actually more target, more people being struck, actually.
So their aim's getting better. What's happening? It's not really helping anybody.
So you see that motor vehicle thefts and robberies continue to trend down. So we're seeing those continue to trend in the right direction. So any questions on our crime sectors?
Yeah.
Sir.
What on the non-fatal shootings, do we have any age data on that?
I don't have a specific age breakdown on those, but we can get that.
So item 3 is on our youth violence prevention. So you can see there the numbers in terms of the agencies that were funded by council. And then in addition, we did do continue to do our call outs. And I think we did our first call in. So Joseph, you want to give us any updates?
Yeah, good morning. So just wanted to kind of provide some high level data for you all for the NOFO agencies. This was through December, so of course it'll be a little bit more now, but about a little over 3,700 youth have been served through our NOFO agencies. We've expended about $301,000 of the total 577 that council approved last year. Below that, you don't have to scroll down now, but below this, there's a few success stories. We just wanted to include some of that just so you all can see some of the successes that the agencies have been having with some of our at-risk youth. Some other updates, we are currently looking at and have open community engagement for the Youth Empowerment Center. I've got a lot of little postcards for you all. We're doing paper surveys in the libraries. Some of our community engagement coordinators and youth violence prevention staff are getting into the schools and the rec centers to also get feedback from youth directly. So if you all would like any of those postcards, it's got a QR code. The front side is English, back side is Spanish. It's got a QR code that takes you directly to Engage Aurora. So I'm happy to share some of those with you if you would like them, just let me know. We've got our first youth summit scheduled for, it'll be the end of March now, I believe 21st of March. Just based on when we were able to get a facility. So that'll be a youth summit where we bring youth, families, adults, anyone that works with youth together to talk through really where we're missing some of the marks, where we have some gaps, not as the youth violence prevention program, but more just as a community of Aurora, so we can hear directly from them. And then we also want to have a little mini job fair kind of attached to that as well. So we'll be moving those forward quarterly. The first one will be the end of March. And of course, as we get more details, we would love to have council members come just to hear from the youth, engage with youth some. And then also we're partnering with some of the internal agencies just to help. We're going to have one at the end of May just to kind of help promote some of those like lifeguard jobs, some of those part-time jobs to get youth engaged over the summer. Not a ton of community activities right now. We're gearing up for a lot, of course, later this spring, early summer. And then for Aurora Save, we've completed now 38 custom notifications. And we have 13 individuals that are currently in contact with our case manager, which is great. And then as Mr. Batchelor mentioned, we also had our first call in last Wednesday. We didn't have the attendance that we were hoping for, but we did, we found where that gap was, and we've already fixed that gap for the next time. But the message was well received. We had a great participation from the community. Mayor Kaufman was there, so thank you again for that and for speaking. So we're really excited to have that first one kind of under our belt, learned a lot, and we're looking forward to the next one. Happy for any questions.
Of course, you know, I think you do a wonderful job. I will say that publicly 100 times to you. I just want to see if, you know, when I was in high school in this city, I was able to go to my counselor's office and get a worker's permit. And from what I understand, they don't even do that anymore. But I was able to start working at 14 years old. And matter of fact, I had to. And I think while it's great, you know, to start hiring these kids at 16, and maybe this is something we can look at with the city. I don't know if it's our insurance policy or what, but I don't understand, you know, why the 14 and 15-year-olds can't be considered for our lifeguard program and some of our other programs and get them working at that age. You know, instead of waiting until they're 16 or 17. So if we could look at that and maybe talk to the school districts and find out. I went to Overland. And they had a workers permit program. So it did exist, I know for a fact. So if that's something that we can work out to get these 14 and 15-year-olds jobs as well.
Sure.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm working with a recruiter who helps support pros specifically for the summer kind of part-time employment. So I'll circle back with her just to see if we're already doing that. I know she's really plugged into the schools as well. So I'll see what I can find out and then definitely.
And I know that we are working very hard to get the childcare centers back open in the gyms. So, you know, even something like that, you know, on weekends, a lot of these, you know, the 14, 15-year-olds, they can be, you know, Red Cross certified, CPR certified, you know, they're certified babysitters, you know, something like that too, a job like that for them too, maybe on the weekends or something.
Yeah, I'll talk with our recruiter, the HR recruiter for pros, and I'll also look at the school districts too, just to see what else is in place there. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, Jurinsky, can I just piggyback on that? One of the things that we had heard from the judges during our last luncheon is that there's also an issue for the 14 and under kids that they're seeing. And I know, you know, way back in the 90s, there used to be programs that weren't jobs, because you're not allowed to have a job under 14, but were like kind of work preparation type programs that would have like a little stipend, and then a program that the younger kids could go through as well. So we can look at partnering with the schools or whoever we might partner with for something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of stuff like that, Councilmember Coombs, just neighborhoods taking it on themselves. Snow shoveling, lawn mowing, stuff like that. And I see a lot of advertisements for 12, 13-year-olds. I know my neighborhood sends out a newsletter with a list of, you know, younger kids in our neighborhood that can be hired for snow shoveling or lawn care, something like that. So I think that needs to come maybe from like our community outreach office to contact some neighborhoods to get involved to help those younger kids to earn a little money and stay busy. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and we're trying to work more closely with our middle schools too. Historically, we've been more involved in high schools, but we know that we need to be more in that middle school age range. And so trying to utilize our grantees that we have also to partner with the schools, get more involved in that capacity too. So as we get that a little bit more formalized in terms of programming and opportunities for the middle school age kiddos, we'll definitely share that with you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
on the call-in part of the SAVE program, you know, I was real impressed with the structure of how it works, but we only had one person show up, and I think out of 13 was the goal. And so what specifically were you able to work out with? It was probation and parole was the gap, right?
Right, so we're in the process, and Mike, I'll let you speak to this a little bit more too. We actually talked with our consultants earlier this week to see how we can follow up, because of those individuals that we invited, there were 5 groups that they were attached to. Since we only had the one person, we only had representation from one group, so we want to make sure that we still get that consistent messaging to those other groups. And so that's what we met with our consultants actually on Tuesday and talked with a little bit more. And I'll let you kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so the issue is actually probation conditions and parole. Parole, it seems to be more of a policy, versus probation. It's, has to be in their conditions, as part of their court process. So we're gonna be having a meeting in the next week or two with those partners to find out what exactly we need to address so that they have more leverage on them to get them to one of those types of meetings. We didn't find out till really late in the game, so we weren't able to take some steps to correct it before our first one. But now that we know that, we will definitely be able to address it going forward.
So out of the other 12, so there's 13 supposed to be. What showed the other 12? How many of that 12 do you know had what is it? There's a term for the visits. What is it?
The custom
Notification, yeah. So none of them received the custom notification because they're invited to the call-in.
But we're gonna be shifting in the next couple of weeks to give that call-in message to those messengers that weren't able to be there. So we're gonna go to them and give that message.
Okay.
I just want to echo the working thing. I once served in a problem-solving truancy court, and I encountered kids, I mentored a couple of them, that didn't want to go to school, but at 14, 15, they wanted to work.
Yep.
So I don't know if there's perhaps an apprenticeship type aspect we could look into that could circumvent rigorous state regulations, but I see the importance of that. And I also wanted to say, I saw the success stories in our packet of some youth, and it's always good to see that. And also with our CRT program, there's some incredible stories of success that I just don't think we hear enough of that. We hear about the how-to get these things done, but not the end result in some certain situations. So perhaps we can even let the public know through study session and a council meeting about some of these great success stories, like the young lady that didn't, a youth that hadn't showered, that changed her clothes in a year, right? And we got her out of her shell and into healing, so stuff like that.
All right, we'll move on.
Okay, so item 4 is our crisis response team. So you guys had a very good update, but Courtney, anything additional to add or any questions for Courtney?
I just have one update and then one promotional. So the update is our second AMRT unit is up and running. They've kind of had their first full month, gotten a lot of kudos from all of our public safety partners as well as the community. So they're doing great work. You'll notice in our stats their number of calls for service have more than doubled. So it's been a really successful launch of that second unit. And we are currently hiring for that third unit as well as that additional vacancy in the CRT program. And then the promotional is we recently had our first of our community training series on last Thursday, and it's titled Together We Can Prevent Mass Violence. This is a deliverable for our federal funding with Department of Homeland Security. We currently have 3 more scheduled with an expectation of 8 total. We had a great turnout. It went really well. We are working to make this as accessible as possible for the Aurora community since we are such a diverse area. We've made handouts that have the main take-home points we want people to really have, talking about what is mass violence, how do we prevent it, warning signs, how to report what happens when I report. And what we have done is we've worked with the International Relations Office to get that translated in the top 5 languages in Aurora. With that is all. Any additional questions, I'm happy to take.
Okay, so the last one is our homeless. And so Jessica, I don't see Emma, so that's what I was looking around for. So sorry, but I'm putting it to you.
Perfect, yeah. Emma's on vacation. If you need anything homeless related, reach out to me in the next 10 days. The numbers are blank. We were waiting on the final January numbers, but we had 175 complaints. We had 60 abatements completed in January. 21 were related to CDOT. 88 people were touch pointed through that abatement process, and of those 88, 37 people were placed into pallets. So that's a higher number than we've seen. It's obviously cold right now, but we are seeing people take that as a shelter opportunity.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So what, well, how many, we have around 80 pallets. How many pallets do we have?
Just under 100 total.
And then what, how many are full right now?
We keep them very full. So every Monday, we determine if there's any available. And then that has the ability for the outreach team as we're doing abatements and before abatements to get people scheduled to go into them. So
I think we need, I'd love to see the policy about how long people, because I know it's kind of been inching up how long people are staying.
right, and we have some that are 30 days and no more. And we're actually now renewing every 2 weeks with folks. So there's the policy, right, where they stay the first week, they have to be engaged in services to stay longer. We reevaluate it 2 weeks, we give them another 2 weeks. So we have the 30-day stay. And then if they're doing well with that, then we move them into the longer stay.
We're gonna move forward.
So that's it on the public safety action plan. We know that council has been discussing amongst yourselves a potential update to that. We look forward to that. Staff's at the ready for when council wants to give us additional direction.
Yeah, and this is like, these ordinances are slowly but surely what we're working on. Miscellaneous matters for consideration. I have one. I am being told, that some of the folks that have been sent to the county jails, the 3 days is a mandatory minimum. But some of these folks have actually been sentenced to longer than 3 days. And those are the ones that are being sent to our county jails. I'm also being told, and double checking on this, but that we actually pay for a certain amount of beds, whether we use them or not. So, and I will get final details on all of this, but yes, please remember, this is a mandatory minimum. So if we have judges sentencing 10 days, they automatically are going to the county jail, and I just wanted to give you that update.
Yeah,
I will get.
And sorry, my concern is not so much about even the first 3 days with motor vehicle theft. It's really just on the retail theft, which will be even more of I just could see it being an even further issue, especially if it's just 100-day retail theft that someone's gonna serve 3 days in jail on. I don't know that, especially if they've never had a prior, they're gonna get more than 3 days. The incidents that I know that I have, tracked, not in any scientific way, but I have at least 4 or 5 examples of just 3 days, not more.
Okay, and they're gonna further look into it. This was just the initial update that I received that I wanted to give the update during this meeting. Does anybody else have any miscellaneous matters for concern? Okay, with that, the current meeting is scheduled next month for the 14th at 9 a.m. That may have to change. I am working on an effort to go overseas and help fight in the war. So if that happens, then we will change the date. But as of right now, the date is March 14th at 9 a.m. right here. Meeting adjourned.
No, I agree, but.
I'm going over there.
What's that? I didn't do, but.